If you were going to build like an entire city from scratch, you wouldn't start by polishing the glass on the skyscrapers,
Right.
right?
Absolutely not. You'd be in the dirt.
Exactly. You'd be right in the mud. You dig the trenches, you'd lay the pipes, run the copper wire, pour the concrete. You'd build the invisible architecture that every single visible thing actually relies on.
Right.
But imagine doing all of that heavy infrastructure work totally alone from a tiny bedroom armed with nothing but like a screeching 56K dial-up connection and a stack of floppy disks.
I mean, it's the kind of brute force undertaking that most people would just abandon after the first week.
Oh, for sure.
We're looking at a stack of archived forum posts, personal memoirs, and late 90s business records today. And what really emerges is just a blueprint of sheer willpower. The amount of manual labor required to build a digital ecosystem back then it's almost incomprehensible to someone using modern software.
Which is exactly why we were pulling this apart. So, welcome to this deep dive. If you were with us for our last session, you'll remember we left our protagonist in what we call the Flagler County era.
Right, the bedroom laboratory.
Yeah, the bedroom lab. We're talking about a guy who moved back in with his mom after his dad passed away, and he transforms her master bedroom into this makeshift tech lab. And he is surviving on just pure hustle.
Just absolute survival mode.
Right. Bouncing at a local bar called Finnegan's 3 nights a week, and then waking up before dawn to cook breakfast at the FAA training center 4 mornings a week.
He was securing his basic physical needs so he could fund his digital ambitions.
Exactly. And today we are zeroing in on episode 2 of this journey, the X1R chapter. Our mission for this deep dive is to figure out the mechanics of what is, honestly, a truly insane trajectory.
It really is.
How does a self-taught web designer go from manually typing HTML menus in a sleepy Florida town to navigating the ruthless corporate machinery of Walmart and eventually finding himself sponsoring race cars in Daytona?
Well, the chasm between those two worlds is just massive. And to understand the bridge he built between them, we have to look really closely at the specific tools he carried into Flagler County. He didn't just have ambition, he had leverage.
Okay, let's unpack this, because you're right, he didn't arrive totally empty-handed. He brought 2 foundational pieces of technology with him. First, a physically battered copy of HTML for Dummies that basically lived permanently on his nightstand. And second, a collection he called the Corel Vault, which was 12 CD-ROMs packed with royalty-free professional vector clip art.
We really need to pause on that Corel Vault because the technical distinction here is everything. In the mid-90s, graphic design was heavily gatekept by technology.
Yeah, big time.
If you were just a standard computer user, you were dealing with raster images, pixels. If you try to make a pixelated image bigger, it just turns into a blurry, blocky mess.
Right, the staircase edges.
Exactly. But vectors are different. Vectors aren't made of pixels, they're made of mathematical equations. So you can scale a vector graphic from the size of a postage stamp to the side of a billboard, and the curves remain perfectly razor sharp.
And back then, those pristine vector files were locked up in like high-end ad agencies on super expensive Mac computers running Quark Express.
Yeah.
Our protagonists called those agency designers cage birds because they couldn't take their work home.
That's a great term for it. But the PC users running Corel Draw were the Nomads. By possessing this vault, which, by the way, cost over $1,000 at the time.
Which is wild for a guy cooking eggs for cash.
Huge capital investment.
All right.
But by having it, he owned the actual digital DNA of professional 90s graphic design. He had the exact geometric shapes, the swooshes, the corporate borders.
So, armed with this vault and a Dummies book, he starts building what he calls the digital shadow of Flagler County. And, think about a local business environment in 1998.
Oh, it was a totally different world.
Right. He is physically walking into auto body shops and diners, places where the owners are still literally smoking behind the cash register and asking if they want to be on his internet directory.
You can imagine the reception he got. The internet was barely a concept for local commerce then. Most of these owners viewed computers as like glorified typewriters or just expensive toys.
Exactly. They'd look at him and say, well, I don't know anything about computers. And instead of getting bogged down trying to explain URLs and servers and all that, his response was just a masterclass in analogy.
What's fascinating here is how he pivoted.
Yeah, he'd point right back at them and say, well, you don't know anything about printing presses either, but you still advertise in the newspaper. Plus, my directory is free.
He instantly neutralized their anxiety. He bypassed the intimidating technical jargon and mapped this terrifying new technology onto a mental model they already trusted, which was print advertising.
So smart.
By removing the financial risk and the learning curve, he turned a hard no into a casual why not.
So they hand him their physical, grease-stained menus, their paper business cards, their handwritten price lists. And he takes all of this back to his bedroom laboratory. And here is where the manual labor really kicks in.
Yeah, the brute force.
Because there are no drag-and-drop website builders like Squarespace or Wix. He is building this digital county using what he calls Russian nesting dolls made of code. We're talking about thousands upon thousands of nested HTML tables.
Let's contextualize what that actually means for a moment. Before modern web design languages existed, the only way to format all web pages, so text and images sat side by side, was to build an invisible grid, a table.
Right.
To make complex layouts, you had to put a table inside a cell of another table, inside a cell of another table. It was incredibly fragile architecture.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
If you missed a single backslash or angle bracket in line 400 of your code, the entire page would just shatter. And the browser wouldn't tell you where the mistake was. You had to hunt it down manually.
And he did this for massive inventories. Like Hudson Tool & Die had over 1,000 individual products and SKUs, and he typed every single one by hand.
Wow.
And because none of these mom-and-pop shops had digital versions of their logos, he's using that Corel Vault to rebuild their branding by eye. He is literally staring at a faded business card under a desk lamp, manipulating Bezier curves, just trying to mathematically match the fonts and colors.
He was retroactively digitizing an entire local economy. And by doing so, he positioned himself as the sole digital gatekeeper. When he printed out their new web pages in full color, showing off their 3D rendered logos with drop shadows, they were just blown away.
They really were. He tells them, just put your new web address in your weekly Penny Saver newspaper ads. And suddenly his directory's domain name is plastered all over the physical county.
It's everywhere.
And because diner menus and auto shop prices change, he starts charging them a small monthly update fee. Often he's just getting paid in free meals, but he's created an entirely closed loop. He basically out-evolved the local print shops.
He completely controlled the real estate. When Yellow Pages season rolled around, the print reps had to come to him because he was the only person in town who held the pristine, vector-based digital artwork for the local businesses.
Okay, I have to stop you there and push back on this.
Yeah.
Because reading through his memoirs, this is the part that genuinely baffles me.
Okay, what part?
He has a monopoly on a town's digital presence. He has recurring revenue. He is basically the mayor of this online ecosystem, getting free cheeseburgers and monthly checks. Why on earth would he give that up? It sounds like trading a gold mine for a pickaxe. It just doesn't make business sense.
Well, it doesn't make sense until you factor in the physical limitations of late 90s hardware. You couldn't just rent cloud storage for $5 a month back then.
It's true.
A 1 gigabyte hard drive was considered a luxury. And vector files, high-resolution logos, and thousands of lines of code eat up memory fast. The sheer volume of data he was managing was outgrowing his physical machinery.
Wait, he was literally running out of space on his hard drive to store the town?
Precisely. And his personal life was accelerating just as fast. By 1999, he was married and had a baby. The pressure was mounting. People around him were constantly telling him to, quote-unquote, get a real job.
Right.
He realized that maintaining this digital county was a full-time job with part-time pay. The architecture he built was just too heavy to carry alone on his current setup.
So we arrive at what he calls the great trade. He doesn't sell his digital directory to a marketing firm for cash. He takes a drive containing the entire digital shadow of Flagler County, every logo, every menu, every line of code, and walks into Ocean Atlantic Computers.
He bypassed the big box stores like Radio Shack because he needed specialized firepower. He negotiated directly with the owner of the local tech shop. He traded his entire portfolio, his recurring revenue, the digital city he built with his own hands, all in exchange for
A custom-built computer.
Exactly.
A total hot rod of a machine. He handpicked the motherboard, the RAM, the high-end video card.
It's a highly calculated sacrifice. He realized the digital directory was just a proving ground. He traded the comfort of a small monopoly to commission the exact vehicle he needed to drive into his next chapter.
But, I mean, a high-performance computer doesn't buy diapers. He has the rig, but now he desperately needs cash flow. That urgency pushes him out of the bedroom and into the classified section of the local Penny Saver newspaper, which leads us directly to a wildly understated ad wedged between yard sales and handyman services. The text just reads, Part-time position for local business. Must know how to use the internet.
That phrasing perfectly encapsulates the corporate mindset of 1998. Businesses knew the internet was happening, but they basically treated it like a complicated fax machine. They just wanted someone to turn it on and make sure it didn't explode.
Right. So he walks into Suncoast Chemicals. It's a small commercial facility tucked behind an industrial park smelling like rubber and ambition. They hire him to essentially check their email. But here is the critical difference between him and anyone else they could have hired. He didn't just look at the email client. He looked at the underlying architecture. He saw the whole board.
Because when you spend a year building an entire digital ecosystem from scratch, you develop a systems-level perspective. You don't just see a sluggish email server. You see how the communication flow impacts the sales team, which then impacts the supply chain.
But he's incredibly strategic about how he engages with them. He keeps his own freelance design company, RPP, completely legally separate from his part-time employment at Suncoast.
It was a smart move.
He does his basic hourly tasks, setting up accounts, teaching the staff how browsers work on their dime. But when they realize their company website is an absolute embarrassment, he pitches them as an outside contractor.
This separation is vital. He convinces them to pay his company separately to rebuild their public face. And this allows him to do the complex, creative, heavy lifting at home on his custom-built hot rod computer, completely insulated from office distractions.
And speaking of office distractions, we have to talk about how he handled being micromanaged at the physical Suncoast office, because it is just hilarious and brilliant.
Oh, this is great.
We all know the agonizing feeling of a manager standing right behind your chair, just watching your screen while you try to work. Today, knowledge workers throw on noise-canceling headphones or block off their digital calendars to protect their focus.
Right, but his defense mechanism was entirely different. He basically weaponized his technical competence.
He would intentionally work at such a blistering, chaotic speed that he broke their ability to comprehend what he was doing.
Yes.
He's alt-tabbing between windows, clicking drop-down menus, rapid-firing lines of code, and moving files so fast that the manager hovering over his shoulder would literally get dizzy.
They couldn't follow it.
They'd get completely disoriented, tap out, say, "Looks like you've got this," and just walk away. He essentially overwhelmed their cognitive bandwidth to buy himself the peace and quiet he needed to actually work.
It proved his value undeniably, though. He wasn't just using the internet. He was operating at a velocity they couldn't even track. And because the new website he delivered was light years ahead of their competitors, Suncoast Chemicals made a massive pivot.
Yeah, they did.
They pulled him off the part-time contractor island, brought him inside, gave him a desk, and handed him a massive physical product challenge.
So we are shifting gears from digital architecture to literal space-age chemistry. Suncoast manufactured a product called X1R Performance Lubricants. This wasn't standard garage oil. This was a high-level, heavy-duty formula that was genuinely used by NASA on the crawler transporters that moved the space shuttles.
The company leadership recognized the value of the chemistry, but they wanted to tap into a broader consumer market. They wanted to take this NASA-grade industrial formula, pivot away from just automotive uses, put it into tiny bottles, and sell it as a premium sports lubricant.
Skate Lube. Same exact chemistry, totally different market demographic, and twice the price per ounce.
It's a brilliant business pivot.
But industrial chemical manufacturers don't know the first thing about marketing to skateboarders. So they hand the entire project to the computer guy.
Because to them, he was the guy who made things look professional. He had the Corel vault, so he designs the packaging, he engineers the graphics, and he establishes the entire visual identity for this new consumer line completely in his lane.
But if he just designed a cool label and stopped there, we wouldn't be talking about him. He realizes that a shiny bottle sitting in a warehouse is completely useless. They needed a cultural foothold. And in the late 90s, the internet was basically a lawless frontier. You could just email famous people, and they might actually respond.
So he starts reaching out directly to athletes who are competing in the very first X Games.
And he doesn't approach them like some corporate stiff in a suit demanding sponsorship ROI. He approaches them as a fan. He asks if they'd be willing to try out this crazy new skate lube.
Yeah.
And he puts together these meticulously designed swag bags full of product and stickers, shipping them directly to the athletes.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, his hybrid strategy is incredibly clear. Back in his bedroom lab, he used to fall asleep listening to old-school analog marketing cassette tapes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He took those pre-internet grassroots hustle tactics, sending physical promotional packages, building personal relationships, and he supercharged them using his digital architecture skills.
He's not waiting for a distributor. He is physically injecting a space-age product into a massive emerging cultural event to generate organic word-of-mouth buzz. He just manufactured cool.
And that grassroots buzz caught the attention of the company's owners in a big way. They saw the polished packaging, they saw the cultural traction, and they realized they had a product ready for the big leagues. And in consumer retail, the biggest, most unforgiving league on the planet is Walmart.
The ultimate boss battle for a physical product. The owners decide it's time to swing for the fences. They pack up, take the web designer with them, and fly to Bentonville, Arkansas.
Entering Bentonville is like entering the Pentagon of retail. It is the machinery of corporate power operating at an unimaginable scale. Walmart doesn't just take a meeting because you have a nice logo. You have to survive a brutal vetting process just to get in the lobby.
But X1R had some significant momentum. They were on the shelves in Pep Boys, they were closing a deal with AutoZone, they had hit their regional advertising quotas, and they had that golden, undeniable NASA endorsement.
Right.
But now, thanks to our protagonist, they also had a highly sophisticated web presence. When the Walmart buyers looked them up, they looked like a massive, established corporate entity that really belonged in the room.
But projecting authority only gets you the meeting. Surviving the meeting requires conforming to their operational machinery. Walmart is notorious for its planogram.
The shelf layouts, right?
Exactly. The incredibly strict, millimeter-perfect diagrams that dictate exactly where and how a product hangs on a shelf.
And this is where my brain kind of breaks. How does a self-taught graphics guy, a guy who was just typing HTML tables in his bedroom 12 months prior, suddenly know how to navigate the strict physical supply chain rules of the world's largest retailer?
Because the core discipline is exactly the same.
Really?
Yeah. Whether you are nesting HTML code so a web page doesn't break, or designing plastic packaging so a shelf display doesn't break, it is all about understanding the architecture of a system. Walmart engineers their shelf space to maximize profit per square inch. If a product's packaging is a quarter inch too wide, it throws off their entire pegboard system and they will literally reject the shipment entirely.
So he didn't just design a pretty sticker. He engineered a fully compliant physical blister pack hanging rack tailored to Walmart's exact physical specifications.
He identified the retailer's biggest point of friction, which was shelf integration, and he designed the product to remove that friction completely. Because the physical packaging was flawless and compliant, Walmart didn't just accept the automotive lubricants, they expanded their order.
That's amazing.
They took the gun lube, the fishing lube, and the skate lube for their sporting goods departments.
Getting placement for a few small bottles in the sporting goods section might seem like a tiny real estate win in a global empire. But a foothold is a massive foothold. And that Bentonville victory served as the catalyst that catapulted this former small-town bouncer into a surreal new reality.
The shift in scale is just staggering.
Look at the rooms this quote-unquote computer guy suddenly finds himself in. Because of his work positioning X1R, he attends the induction ceremony for NASA's Space Technology Hall of Fame.
Incredible.
He gets a private VIP tour of the NASA shuttle crawler. He describes standing next to this thing not as looking at a vehicle, but as standing next to a moving continent.
He traded a view of his mother driveway for the launch pad at Cape Canaveral.
And the volume just keeps turning up. X1R secures the main sponsorship for Mike Wallace's Chevy in the 40th running of the Daytona 500. He's right there in the mix.
The high-octane world.
Exactly. He's watching Buck Parker race the X1R Corvette in the car and driver one lap of America. They are plastered across Daytona racetracks. He even steps into the role of executive producer for Bobby Lakis's nationally syndicated Car Clinic radio show.
This specific chapter of his life is relatively short chronologically, but it functions as an incredibly dense, high-stakes education. He saw the inner workings of the Bentonville machine. He learned the brutal mechanics of negotiating physical retail scale. He operated at the exact intersection of grassroots action sports, billion-dollar space technology, and the deafening roar of NASCAR.
All right, let's bring this all back down to earth. What does this deep dive actually mean for you, the person listening to this right now? Because the takeaway here obviously isn't that you need to go learn archaic HTML coding or figure out how to mathematically measure a plastic blister pack for a retail giant.
No, the specific tools he used are completely obsolete. The mindset, however, is deeply, deeply relevant.
The real lesson is the concept of seeing the whole board. When you walk into a new job, a new industry, or a new project, how do you behave? Do you just fulfill the exact parameters of the job description? Do you just use the internet like the penny saver ad requested?
Right.
Or do you actively search for the underlying architecture? Are you looking for the structural inefficiencies, the hidden connections, the opportunities to elevate the entire operation from the ground up?
He didn't just check the inbox, he rebuilt their public-facing identity. He didn't just color in a logo, he engineered a physical entry point into a new subculture at the Tex Games. He understood that perception is architecture. If you construct an environment where you look like you belong at the highest level, eventually the highest level opens the door.
And it's worth teasing that while this high-octane era of NASA crawlers and VIP racing boxes feels like an incredible peak, for him it was merely another stepping stone.
Oh, absolutely.
The brutal lessons he absorbed in this chapter, understanding corporate supply chains, negotiating massive scale, blending a physical product with a digital footprint, they were forging him for an even more massive leap down the road.
It is a relentless cycle. You build an infrastructure, you outgrow the build, and then you leverage it to fund the next evolution. Which leaves you with a thought we haven't touched on yet, but one that is crucial to this kind of trajectory.
Let's hear it.
It's the philosophical concept of constructive destruction. Sometimes the only way to prove you truly understand the architecture of your own life is your willingness to completely tear it down to see if you can build it better somewhere else. This raises an important question. When you look at the digital shadow of your own career, the routines you've mastered, and the foundational work you've outgrown, are you holding on to it out of comfort, or are you willing to trade it all away to commission the vehicle that will drive you into your next chapter?
Because you can't build the skyscrapers until you're willing to step out of the trenches you dug in the dark. It might be time to pack up your own Corel vault, leave the safety of the bedroom lab behind, and see what happens when you finally decide to view the whole board.